Welcome back to my channel, Benji Ndolo, Kama Kawaida. It's coincidental, the last time we spoke, it wasn't really my intention to be talking about the control of budget, but as fate would have it, the biggest scandal, if you may, came about just around the time we were having the discussion about the fight between control of budget. It's always very interesting to me. First of all, I'm going to give you, my audience, a few tips. When you're listening to public leaders, I'll help you with a few tips that will assist you to gauge on how well informed a government functionary, a senior civil servant, because they're the ones who usually do policy pronouncements, a civil society, governance expert, as they call themselves. If you see someone talking about central government, they don't know what they're talking about. They haven't read the constitution. If you see someone talking about COB, there's no such terminology as COB. People think it's COB. It's actually OCB is the real terminology defined in the constitution. And I left my constitution copy in the car, which I'll bring and we can discuss Article 229 and all these other IOs, independent offices in the constitution. So the OCB is the Office of the Controller of Budget. Now, before we start talking about Margaret Nyakango today, I'm going to give you guys just a very, very brief tutorial on what really happened with these constitutional commissions, independent offices, their place in the constitution, why they were founded, etc., and who did the most to cause the kind of watering down and the kind of fear that you saw with that lady when she was in Parliament, Margaret Nyakango. Now, what happened is, as per her own testimony, she talked about receiving threats. And for me, this is very interesting because when we passed the new constitution, Uhuru Kenyatta, the fourth president, was then the finance minister. And I was in civil society. So I remember it being said around civil society circles, how the finance minister went to President Kibaki and Uhuru is he's such a good communicator. And he said, Your Excellency, na hii kitu, because there's a component for civic education. He said, hii kitu itakuja kutuumiza, kutukula. And so they didn't really want the new constitution. Yes, there was, remember the watermelons tag that was used at that time. This tag was true of the former Minister Michuki. I mean, wealthy Kenyans holding large tracts of land and what have you, including, of course, Finance Minister at the time, Uhuru Kenyatta, Kenyatta family. So they were very reluctant, and Kibaki wasn't. They were very reluctant about the constitution, the new constitution as we called it. But then this tag, because they're also very adept, very strategic, very quick, very tactical, this tag was left, boom, on Kalonzo Musyoka. So his one was known as a watermelon. But at the time, a lot of all these guys were in the same boat of a lot of doubt about a very liberal constitution with so many freedoms, human rights enshrined in there, right to housing, right to food even. And so they were very reluctant. Now, what happened is, and the reason I'm giving this background is because the Office of Controller of Budget should not operate like a department in the ministry under the Ministry of Finance. And I remember C.S. Duale a few years back when I was consulting for the Auditor General under the World Bank. I remember C.S. Duale then, as majority leader, trying to water down the constitution. We called it amending the constitution through the back door by bringing legislation to make the Office of the Auditor General, again, to be an appendage of the executive under the Ministry of Finance. And our argument was that this is not acceptable because the Ministry of Finance is an auditee. The Auditor General, how can you be independent when you're receiving your funding from the minister who you're also auditing how he's spending money? So this kind of thing was really pushed by Uhuru, first as finance minister, second as president, so that Margaret Nyakango should not be at the mercy of communicating between herself and the president through the Minister of Finance, the CS Finance, which is precisely what happened. And he was actually threatening her. When she was asking him, you mean I have only 26 minutes? So again, when we got leadership that didn't believe in the constitution, that is when really our problems deepened. That is when, in metaphorical Kenyan speak, the rain started beating us. And so here's the lady, Margaret Nyakango, now saying, I moved this amount of money, I moved that amount of money, basically under duress. It is really sad that this actually happened. I have seen a lot of people condemning her. I don't know her. I've never met her. I know her predecessor, Agnes Odhiambo, was admitted in Nairobi Hospital after the Eurobond, scandal. And she was admitted saying, these people are going to kill me. It is very easy to take the theoretical path and say, oh, you're an independent office, you're a constitutional commission. It's not easy to fight back. It's not everyone is born a fighter. And I just wish to remind Kenyans here what happened to Philomena Mwilu, the Deputy Chief Justice, when she tried to be independent during the 2017 election. Everybody knows the kind of harassment this lady underwent. She received a visit, by the way, from DPP, the current DPP now, Nuruddin. Nuruddin's name nowadays is in anything and everything. Together with Kinoti, the same Kinoti, the one that President Ruto and his government have been castigating. This Kinoti visited Deputy CJ Mwilu, and promised to arrest her. So they visited in the official vehicles like today and promised to come back, and they came back the next day. So imagine arresting a Deputy Chief Justice, not that she's above the law, and then arraigning her in a court of her juniors. She's the DCJ. She's also a judge of the Supreme Court. So how do you, it gets so messy. Her driver got shot. There was all manner of nuance and threats and what have you. And here are Kenyans running around saying Margaret should have. It's not easy to fight a president. It's not easy to fight Uhuru. A lot of you guys are just talking. You don't know Uhuru in person. You can't. It's not easy to fight Ruto, even now. So we do need to run a country that is run on the rule of law, but let us not be academically theoretical to just be saying, this lady was under duress. And the kind of monies that you're talking about, remember the former CS had again rushed to DCI to report Robert Alai, a blogger, who publicized with Cyprian Nyakundi, I believe, a video that went viral of allegedly of the CS Finance's son at the airport carrying $4 million in cash. Where do you think these guys are getting this money? This is our money. This is your money. This is taxpayer money. So one of the things that I would like to address on my show is just the nature of, big money in politics, the source of this big money. Therefore, the logical reasoning that behind politics is also this big money as a driver of corruption. As a necessity, as a practical matter, you need big money to campaign, to get elected. You've seen how all these threats that Raila is running around issues, you've seen how there are allegations all over the place about who is funding him and who has funded him before, who has been funding the media. That's why we're moving into new media now. Because how do you explain a situation where, for instance, in the last campaign, Citizen TV, a station I've worked with before, gives 5 minutes of primetime coverage to Mr. Raila Odinga, gives 5 minutes to Honorable Kalonzo Musyoka, gives 5 minutes to Miss Martha Karua, gives 5 minutes to the owner SK Macharia, and then gives 5 minutes to the deputy president at the time in a campaign period. Of 25 minutes coverage, you've given 20 to Azimio until people are calling you Azimio TV. Where are the tenets of fairness and objective journalistic, balance, fair and balanced reporting? I digress. This attack on an independent office is what has led us where we are. And so the calls to remove the control of budget are really not sincere. Kenyans never have a track record of defending truth tellers. Look at what I go through for speaking truth, for saying this is what is happening with these dynastic families that are, exploiting the poor, that are brainwashing youth. You've been defeated in elections time and time again. You are now saying again it's open the server. People caricature me, they Photoshop, they call me names, etc. Nobody remembers David Munyanke, the guy who did the whistleblowing on Goldenberg, on Anglo Leasing. John Gidongo couldn't live in Kenya after wearing a microphone and recording his boss plotting Anglo Leasing and saying it's a must we do things like Anglo Leasing. And so why do you want to put this lady out there so that she continues to put her life at risk? It's bad enough that she even pushed back a little bit. It's bad enough that she was not available on SMS when the minister needed her urgently. When he's telling her, hey, I need you to rush because the president is calling back. It's just terrible, the kind of looting that has gone on. And I just wanted to single out the controller of budget as an issue and say these things are for real. There's what you call budgeted corruption. The former Auditor General, Eddie Ouko, you saw what he went through. He went through a lot with his entire office. And not everyone is as strong, as well built, to undergo. I really hate to say this on camera. I remember his security reaching out to me just in the kind of line of work that I do and saying, we feel that the boss's life is at risk. Can you ask the Inspector General to bump up, the security for the Auditor General, because I hold a government-issued firearm. They know which firearm I'm holding. They know the number of bullets I have. We have to move around, even around the counties to audit the work being done. And the security really saying this to me, that I feel that I cannot even do my job adequately enough to protect the boss, and I cannot just quit, therefore, because this is a life and death matter. I just sat in that meeting, I listened, and knowing that the kind of Inspector General, as the President said, that was there before, given a crisis, he cannot make the right judgment, he cannot make the right move, he could care less. That was really, really painful. And so part of the reason why we're doing this show is we bring you the kind of discussions in depth that you're not going to get on a broadcast, so that you have the opportunity to really see what happens behind the scenes, what happens with governance, as complex as it is sometimes in our country, and so that you have a deeper understanding of what is really going on, and therefore ultimately what we should do, what we as Kenyans should do about it. So we're straight shooting here. It's Benji Ndolo. When we come back, we will talk about cartel captures, because I had a question about that. We've talked about the constitutional place of the controller of budget. And also at some point, we'll talk about drought and the economy, because I promised you last week that we'll talk about that. Keep it here. Subscribe. Tell someone about this channel. Tune in, watch, ask me questions, engage. We only do this for a better country. Thanks for watching. Back in a moment.